Hello everyone and welcome to Capes, Cowls Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster, a sound designer and a writer for the Fresh Take Hub, and as always I'm joined by my fellow co-host.
Hello, I'm David Oscar. I am also a writer, editor and fellow nerd.
Yes. And welcome to our spoiler review episode of Hawkeye. This is the 32nd entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the 5th Disney Plus show in a new era for Marvel. So we're going to be discussing the story, themes, performances, and any other filmmaking aspects that we liked or didn't like, and where we think these characters can go in the future. Unfortunately, Tom will not be joining us today as he, unlike Hawkeye, has decided to spend the whole Christmas period with his family and wanted to avoid any crime syndicates or tracksuit mafias on the way. So on this festive review, we welcome back to the show Craig McDonald. How you doing, Craig?
I'm very well, Jake. How are you guys?
Yeah, doing really well. Enjoying the festive period. And it's actually kind of funny because it was a year ago when you were last on the show when we did Wonder Woman 84.
Okay, so this is very much just like I'm the drunk uncle that just shows up at Christmas and just
feels that way.
says some things for a while and then goes away again.
It feels that way.
Yeah, last year you were ranting about DC and now you're like, oh, that Marvel stuff.
I didn't really... Yeah, I mean, I was actually a relatively pleasant uncle, I thought, last year. I didn't rag on things, and I'm unsure if that's... No, it should be the case today. I should be fine.
Yeah, I was going to say I was probably the grumpy uncle on that episode out of the three of us.
I was just trying to think of a way of bringing up the Marvel DC stuff but tying in with the uncle stuff. So I was like, drunk uncle, why not?
It's making some bold assumptions about me, David.
Well, let's see what next year brings, I guess. So yeah, we're going to be getting into Hawkeye, the TV show. This is created by Jonathan Igler, who is the head writer and creator of the show. And the series is directed by Rhys Thomas, who directed episodes 1, 2, and 6, and Burton Bertie, who directed episodes 3, 4, and 5. So before we get into the actual show itself, we're going to talk about maybe our history with this character, Hawkeye, and our relationship with him in the MCU, played by Jeremy Renner. As our guest, Craig, what is your relationship with this character? Were you one of the few fans who was one of their favorite characters from the very beginning, or were you more one of those fans who were like, he's one of the side characters?
So I'd be lying if I said he was my utter favorite character, but it was definitely because of I remember watching him for the small role that he had in there and just thinking every line that they gave him was gold, and just the sort of attitude he portrayed in it was quite fun. So then when they basically they shaft him hard in Avengers, and I'm one of the people that, as cool as it was to kind of see the image of him being brainwashed and then working alongside Loki, it definitely removed a lot of his personality. And the fact that the only line of his from that entire film I can remember is the we remember things much differently, which got beautifully memed later on. I can't say he was given like the greatest chances, and obviously there's just lots of times where they could have utilized him a lot more for the MCU in certain situations. They just don't give him anywhere near the amount of opportunities like they do with other characters. But I've always enjoyed watching him, and I think the storyline they give him, especially going into to Endgame and to another extent this show, I really enjoyed. I really enjoy the fact that they try and build him up as the most family and orientated Avenger insofar as his priorities. I really enjoyed that he's constantly got these things on the back of his mind, and I especially enjoy the Ronin stuff. That's why I love that it was a big part of this, and I can't wait to talk about that more later. But like, he's been up there for me as like one of my most enjoyed consistent Avengers. I just think that they haven't given him enough opportunities to sort of show off that stuff. I think probably his biggest chance outside of the Avenger films would have been Civil War, but there's so much going on in that film that it's, again, hard for him to really have that big statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Civil War would have been tough to give him a bit more to do in an already congested film. Dave, how about you? Because I know you've been a big fan of Hawkeye for a long time now. And sort of like with Wanda and Vision, this year has been your year for like underappreciated characters getting the spotlight.
Yeah, and I think the TV shows have proved why that was the case, in the sense that like here's where we can explore these characters and why they're unique. I think the characters like Cap and Iron Man don't really lend themselves to that medium as much, because they're kind of just like bold in your face, this is who I am. Whereas because these are more complex, realistic characters, which like for myself, I appreciated about in the films and could see that in those movies. I think that's where we get to explore that in these series, which is great. So yeah, I was really happy to have this be one of the first announced series when they were first doing it. And I think the more we learned about it as it was coming out, it seemed like it was, going in the right direction. Obviously, when we did our sort of reaction to the trailer, I was very much taken back. But ultimately, like when it comes to the films, etc., I think it's just always been a case of, especially if for people who grew up in the 90s and that kind of stuff, we remember, the days when it was like, it would be a different Batman all the time, and you just had to get used to that fact, and it would just wipe the slate clean. So, it's been a real transition for us to go from like that era to like all this kind of canon in-universe stuff. So Hollywood very much was like, oh, we're just going to pick the cool bits and the very like glitzy, stuff that's going to draw people in. And I think it was to Marvel's benefit that they didn't have the rights to characters like Spider-Man when they first started the Avengers films, because they could have almost done something like that. They could have gone, right, let's get Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, let's get all the popular characters at once. So I was always really kind of intrigued from the moment they cast Jeremy Renner to be like, oh, cool, we're going to have this character who's like an archer, and everyone likes archers. That's always a cool thing, Legolas in Lord of the Rings and Katniss Everdeen and all that kind of stuff. So I think as soon as they cast him and he was coming in, I was just always the most intrigued by him as to how are you going to make this work when you do have all these characters who can fly around and smash things and have got like beams of light and all of this kind of stuff. And like Craig, it was disappointing for half of that film. He's kind of taken out of the equation in some ways. But then I think that Battle of New York did such an effort to sort of like give him his own agency and strengths as a character, which then gets brought up again in this series, which is kind of like my experience is almost like Kate's. I was like, wow, what a great character to have, in which he doesn't need to have these powers to still save the day. So I'm glad that has stayed true to the character so far. And also he's just helped to bring about some of my favorite moments in the MCU and brought a lot of those favorite characters into the fold. He was very close to Wanda in a ways. He sort of helped her with the whole Sokovia, like sort of saying if you leave those doors, you're an Avenger, which is a great moment in that film. You have the great moment in Civil War where he breaks her out of the compound, etc. And then just funny moments like, I appreciated in Age of Ultron that he says, not doing the brainwashing thing, you've done that. And then there's this also the Civil War, the like, we haven't met yet. I'm Clint. It's just like, I don't care. It's just the humor and the type of character he was, has set him up perfectly for this kind of series, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Nice one, Dave. Unlike you guys, I was one of those fans that really just didn't get Hawkeye. Well, not that I didn't get him, I just wasn't drawn to him in any way. He was always, for me, like just the guy on the side to make up the sixth member. And that's nothing on Jeremy Renner. I thought he played the role fantastically throughout the films. I always just felt in whatever film he was in, the writers or directors, up until Endgame anyway, they didn't seem quite not to know what to do with the character in a lot of the situations. Like, that's why you get in the first Avengers the brainwashing, and then in the Age of Ultron, like, oh, we have to make up for that, so let's give him this story, a family story arc thing. And then he's missing for an Infinity War because he's retired, and that's why in Civil War they have to bring him out of retirement because he retired in the last film, sort of thing. And it wasn't really until Age of Ultron there was a moment where, in that final battle, where it's the moment where Wanda's just like losing it, and then Hawkeye takes her to the side and says, look, like I'm paraphrasing, but there's flying robots around, you're a magic witch, and I've got a bow and arrow. None of this makes any sense. And it was that line where I was like, okay, I think I know what they're trying to do with this character now. But it wasn't until Endgame when they gave him that, opening with the film as well, with that scene of his family disappearing, and then transitioning into the story of Ronin. I thought, oh, wow, this is so interesting, so much more complexity to this character that we never really saw before, because we always got hints of Black Widow having, a bloody ledger and like a violent past, but it never really seemed like that with Hawkeye. And I'm glad that in the Endgame, the Ronin angle, and then in this show, they actually highlighted that. They say, no, this guy was a serious spy dude, and he killed a lot of people, and he's also got a lot of blood on his ledger as well. So I love that they explored that in this show, and it's gave me a new appreciation for the character and for Jeremy's role in the character. And I kind of hope, is this the end for him? I hope not. I hope we now get a bit more Renner. And the great thing about these shows is that they're giving these characters this opportunity to, just be the character in a way. Because, the hard job of building the character is already done. He's had so many movies with him. He just gets to be this character and just have fun with this role. Do you know what I mean? Not think about how is he feeling in this big moment and that big moment within the grander scheme of the MCU. It's just this self-contained coming home for Christmas story. And I love it. I had a lot of fun with it. So on that note, then, let's move into the show. Craig, what are your general overall thoughts of this show now that we've seen the 6 episodes? And what do you... technically we did have Iron Man 3, which dabbled in the Christmas. But I think this is the MCU's first proper foot in the Christmas theme. And what did you make of that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is definitely the first full on, because I think Iron Man 3 definitely tried to lean itself more towards closer to New Year sort of territory with flints of Christmas. This is just full on unashamed festive feeling. And my only worry for it in terms of that is just going to be rewatchability, because David knows this very well, but I'm very much a Christmas is the sort of time of the year which, unless it is not Christmas, get in the box, and I will not deal with anything to do with Christmas unless it is basically essentially December 1st till December 25th. That's your period. Anything outside of that, get out, get lost. So even watching the first couple of episodes of Hawkeye was very much, this feels blasphemous to me. I did enjoy it. It's one of those things that I've always liked the idea of these TV shows, just because it definitely allows itself to deal with lower stakes. And I think for that, just having like a general sort of easy to enjoy sort of story, I think is quite nice for that. And I think overall, I definitely enjoyed it. I really like a lot of the side characters they necessarily introduced. I think when we get into it, I will talk about probably my new favorite set of characters insofar as comic possibilities. In the LARPers, I genuinely love those guys. I think overall, I think the show is good. I'm not sure if I can necessarily call it exceptional, because I think that while I did enjoy the sort of lower stakes, the Tracksuit Mafia to me never really did it as villains. They come off a bit like a really, really incompetent Team Rocket, and that's saying a lot, because Team Rocket are incompetent as hell. They just show up for like really, really mundane jokes and conflict, and they never really felt like a major threat apart from a handful of obvious examples. So as much as I enjoyed the lower stakes, I wasn't sure if I enjoyed all of the conflicts. But even then, I think there were enough story elements about exploring Hawkeye as very much a war-scarred veteran of combat, having to deal with a bright-eyed like archery prodigy, that I was willing to get along enough with it. It's just one of those things where I think Marvel started out very much with probably their strongest show immediately. So everything after that is very much having to compare itself to WandaVision, and just sometimes those comparisons are just not favorable for them. Yeah, it's a good show.
Yeah, it's a good, wholesome Christmas fun show. Dave, what are your thoughts? As you mentioned up top, you were a bit trepidatious at the beginning going into it with the trailer and the Christmas theme to it.
Yeah, and I would say that probably this and Suicide Squad, the David Ayer one, are like the two contrasting examples of how a trailer can make something look completely different from what it actually is. In the case of Suicide Squad, it's like, oh, let's make this like darker crime film appear this way and then cut the film that way as well because it went down so well. And in this case, it's kind of like, oh, let's make this the big Christmas Marvel show full of antics and madness. And actually, it was really refreshing then to watch it and be like, oh, okay, no, that's it. It isn't that, thank God. So, I've thankfully was really wrong on that front. My worries, like in episode 1, as soon as this started, and it was just like, even maybe after the initial stuff with Kate, when it's like, her with the bell tower and everything, you were like, okay, I think I'm pretty safe now. There's a focus on character. We're getting introduced to the story. It isn't just Avengers at Christmas. So those worries were wiped away very quickly. And actually, I did come around like, a full 180 on it in the sense that like, I was like, I think that this Christmas backdrop actually really suits the vibe and the theme of the show in the sense of, it's still dealing with like, crime and the underworld and that idea of like sort of like being in the alleys and the warehouses, but you've still got like the soft glow of Christmas lights in the background. The fact that like New York obviously helps with that. That idea of just like, getting back home for Christmas is obviously just a cheesy cliche, but I don't think that they relied on that too heavily. But it's just something about that Christmas vibe. I think similar in a way to, as we've mentioned before, with like Shane Black, how he uses it in his films like Iron Man 3 and stuff. It just kind of adds some sort of weird grit to the film somehow. So it's similar here. It adds that sort of added stakes and theme into the series, which is quite nice. And it did feel like when you were watching it in December, you were like, oh, this is nice. You got something Christmassy to watch each week, even though it wasn't, again, like in your face kind of, this is about Christmas. So yeah, overall, I would probably say that unlike a lot of people, and I think it's interesting that Craig also mentioned this about like lower stakes. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter, etc., say like, this was just too low stakes for me, really passable Marvel, like nothing really happened, bottom tier. I'm like, for me, that actually makes it higher tier Marvel because I find it refreshing that I'm not there going like, I need to like get up at like 6 a.m. in the morning and rush to see it before somebody spoils it for me. And I'm not there like waiting for the big reveal every episode, and there's not going to be this huge like universe changing event. So I think that that definitely helped it. And I think for me, this is possibly like my second favorite of the Disney Plus shows, behind WandaVision, just because, like I said, it just spent so much time with the characters, focused so much on their problems and introducing new characters. It didn't rely on like, right, here's all these characters you've known before. This, I felt, was a really good balance of old and new, and predominantly new, because, it was really just Hawkeye and his wife were the only real like legacy characters. So I felt that the fact that, even someone like Florence Pugh still feels like a newcomer, etc. So I think that they balanced that really well. And I just loved the fact that it was the first time we got like a new, you were watching Haley Stanfield going, oh, wow, I'm watching a potential future Avenger now being set up. And it's being done masterfully because she's such a charismatic actress. But also this story is really serving her well in setting up the relationship with Hawkeye and her mother and the entire storyline and stuff. It was something that I was like intrigued to watch week on week. And just, again, the style of it. Sometimes I don't think the action and some of the sort of pacing quite works. But overall, like I said, I have to give something more credit when I find that it's invested in character and story and just embraced its tone. I just enjoyed the fact that it was consistent.
Like Dave, I was trepidatious going into it with the Christmas thing element of it. And like you, Craig, I'm the same as you. I'd like put anything that's related to Christmas away until December 1st. Then you're allowed to do that. So, and I also thought, this kind of feels like this weird corporate Disney, let's put it at Christmas and then release it on Disney Plus. And I don't know, it just had this weird corporate thing about it. But it wasn't even the first episode for me. It was when they released that sort of extended look of it on Disney Plus Day, amongst like the big 15-minute thing they released, where they showed the extended sequence of them running away from the tracksuit mafia and the car chase scene and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, my troubles of it being too Christmassy are over. I'm like, this looks awesome. And then watching the show, I'm like, this is just good, clean, wholesome fun for me. And like you guys, I liked the low stakes of it. I'm looking forward to getting more into the street level elements of the MCU because we've had such a big, epic cosmos events. And even with Loki and WandaVision, they are all tying up to the multiverse and what's coming down the line. So yeah, I do like these low stakes. I like the characters they're bringing in here. I thought all the performances were actually phenomenal throughout. Everyone killed it. And as you know, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but Jeremy Renner, this is the best he's ever performed this character. And I've said that about all the other leads that we've got for the Marvel TV shows, and that's because they can just be this character and get to experiment and have time with them. And I really, really thought he had delivered a strong performance. However, I think this show, is also trying to do too much. I think there's a lot of story and plot stuff that is, for me anyway, doesn't all quite come together at the end. There's a lot to be desired towards the end of how they handled, spoiler alert, this is a spoiler review, the reveal of the Kingpin and his storyline, Yelena's relationship with Clint and their rivalry and stuff like that, and introducing Kate Bishop and her mother and all of that sort of stuff. I think this show was just trying to do a lot at times, and it was I feel as if it needed a couple of episodes. A couple more, like just one or two, I think would have maybe wrapped it all up nicely and given a bit more time with certain characters. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this show. I was shocked how much I enjoyed the show, considering my thoughts going into it. So I'm looking forward to getting more into that.
Hawkeye and I are working on a case, and we needed to use the bathroom. He did. So we were by the house and we dropped in. No big deal.
Working on a
How
case
terrific.
together?
He's my partner.
We're not partners.
Well, we're friends / partners.
I wouldn't really describe us as friends.
Someone used my laptop to sign out of my work account 10 minutes ago. Any thoughts, Kate? Hawkeye?
Oh, you'll never get anything out of him. See, CB1 has trouble opening up.
Nobody calls me CB1.
I'm just trying to know for a second. It's probably some early childhood thing. He thinks he doesn't tell me much, but he ends up kind of...
I virtually tell her nothing.
But yeah, I think it's because I'm generally just pretty chill. You know, I'm not like, oh my God, Hawkeye!
Definitely not chill.
By the way, thank you for saving the world.
Don't mention it.
So we'll talk about like the story and the plot and any themes that we liked about it. As I said, there's a lot going on in this. You've got the Hawkeye wanting to go home for Christmas element of it. You're introducing Kate Bishop with the Ronin, leftovers from Ronin and dealing with all of that, and introducing the Tracksuit Mafia and bringing back Kingpin into the MCU, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. Craig, how did you think they dealt with all of the story arcs in this? And was there any sort of one in particular that you liked?
So I'm glad you said what you said about the episode count, because David, would you like to tell Jake when you asked me what I thought of the show, what I told you the show needed?
More episodes?
Don't sound so unsure of it. I exactly said it needs exactly 2 more episodes. Because I agree with you completely. I think that bringing everything together at the end definitely seemed like a bit of a jumble. I think the Kingpin reveal would have been more impactful if we had probably like another episode to really enjoy him, because obviously he gets the finale, and he gets the. Let's face it, he probably is dead, but they try and shoot it in such a way to which it is ambivalent.
He's not dead.
Okay, you two are
Come
smirking,
on.
so he's not
Yeah,
dead.
Come on,
I
now.
know. Do you kill Kingpin?
You
introduce
don't
him?
bring Vincent D'Onofrio back for that. Just for that, I don't think anyway.
I agree, but let's not forget this is Marvel, and their track record of doing the right thing with villains is not up there. Let's be fair. They may have done it just for shock value, but like I said, within the series itself, unless you have all of the context of they're building up to the reveal of Kingpin. The only reason I had any idea it was coming is because I read reports that apparently episode 5 is going to break Twitter. At which point I was just sat there just going, right, so it's going to be some big reveal. What is it likely to be? Well, they keep talking about this boss when it comes to the Mafia. It's probably Kingpin. And wait for it. Yep, there he is. There he is. And it wasn't one of those like, oh my god, this is amazing. This is just, yeah, this is your pull. So I definitely would have liked to have seen probably the reveal happen when it did, but just like I said, like a bit more time to actually enjoy his sort of antics, because obviously I can't call it antics. What the hell, Craig? It's a mobster. Yeah, no, actually see him be genuinely dangerous as well, because we also have these hints of Hawkeye not wanting to get him involved and seeing him as dangerous, but we have no context for why that necessarily is until right at the end, where like it's just basically a big boss fight. I don't think it did him the best insofar as like the actual character. The performance of him was obviously great. But I would have just liked to have seen him have more presence within the show, even if there's just anything else to sort of hint from a story perspective he was coming in. The actual storylines themselves, in terms of like the relationship between Kate Bishop and Clint, looking at the legacy of Ronin and how he impacted a lot of things within the MCU, I genuinely thought they did them fantastically. I think Kate Bishop as a character was one that had to warm to me over time, because there were times where, yeah, she's energetic and ambitious, but can be a bit full on at times. So I very much had to sort of warm to her, and eventually I did, and I think that works really well. But then I also just see myself as Clint, which is just very, very sort of tired and jaded with a lot of the MCU charm. So I think that was a good stand-in. So, and also just, I love the legacy of the suit itself, just having so much, and the fact that they actually go into just a little bit more detail of just the things that Clint did to be able to, actually kill the people he did. The fact that he was willing to get tip-offs from other criminals to find out who to basically attack. And I think that that somewhat darkens what I thought was already a dark character. Because the thing I loved about Ronin was just he went on a killing spree because it's just, why did you scumbags have to live when good people died? So I'm just going to kill you off. The fact he was then not only willing to kill them, but stoop down his morals even further to be like, I'll let you live if you give me the information so I can kill other people. And that happened. Just holy crap. And just really deepens that amount of guilt. I just love that. I also, forgive me for guessing characters' names, but Kate's mother's fiance, who had the thing with swords.
Oh, Jack Duquesne.
Jack Duquesne, of course. Yeah. Although his name should have been Jack the Sword, given how much he loves the bloody
the sword master, man. I love that guy.
I'm unsure about how successfully I think they built up the fake out with him. I don't know whether it's just because the way they wrote his character was very, very smart, sort of smarmy and out there, which really worked in the finale when he is just slashing the crap out of the Tracksuit Mafia. But in terms of an actual, is he really the villain? Is he not? I'm unsure about how much I think they pulled it off. I think they probably needed to make him a little bit more subtle, I think, for me to believe that he would have any sort of dealings with this at all. And I think that was obviously necessary then to sort of believe it could be him, to then believe, to go, oh, it was actually her working for the Kingpin all along. But I also think my favorite aspect of this show, apart from, like I mentioned, the LARPers, I think Maya is a fantastic character, just beautifully threatening. I think the way they handled her story and involvement, as much as, flashback montage sequences are not the most novel form of storytelling, I thought was quite effective insofar as the placing of it, insofar as leaving her as a cliffhanger and then having this. So you get the full emotional involvement. I thought was a really nice touch. And just for deaf audiences as well, just seeing someone that absolutely kick ass. I just thought she was like a very compelling character, and I hope they find something to do with her in the future. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you wanted me to say. But yeah, no, that's what I sort of thought about, like the main sort of story strands.
All right, cool. Dave, what about you then? What do you think of all the story arcs, and is there anyone that stood out for you?
Yeah, well, like you guys, I suppose I'll get the negatives out the way, and I do agree. I think the villains are kind of like the biggest flaw maybe of the series, and I think especially because throughout it you kind of are like wondering who am I following, who are we against, and that can kind of work within mob stuff sometimes. It kind of has the same appeal that Ant-Man and the Wasp does, in that like everyone's after this one item, that kind of like sort of treasure hunt, heist sort of element of everyone's after the same item. So when the different factions are coming in, but as Craig said earlier, then because the tracksuits are the only major force, then you don't quite get that element of like different factions, because you realize the Maya is like associated with them as well. But yeah, I think I would maybe say, I'm not sure if you need 2 episodes, but I definitely agree with Craig that you would need an episode to kind of, like he said, show why Hawkeye is like, this guy is dangerous, show if there's a history there, and to just give us a bit more time with the character, how exactly he's involved with these different factions, how he's operating within this world, I guess, almost, because he is like, this is, his first time in an official sort of MCU production, even though Daredevil, etc., is meant to be connected to the MCU. It's never been, yeah, exactly said. Kevin Feige's there, like, yep, so I think that kind of makes you, because it was so embedded in just Daredevil, it wasn't like he showed up in like Defenders or anything like that in like a major way. I think that could have helped if it sort of said like, right, here's how he is, connected to other factions or something like that. Similar to how in Shang-Chi, how you learn that the 10 rings are connected to like different events, and when you go to that, the Fight Club, and you see like somebody, like you see like a widow agent, and you see like somebody with Extremis, it kind of just is adding it to the overall Marvel world. And for me, I think that, even though I loved the finale, and I think it does kind of do the traditional sort of like wrap everything up, which I think is hard to avoid really in a series unless you are leaving it on some sort of cliffhanger. I think, again, that's just where the villain stuff just kind of lost its footing, in the sense that like, oh yeah, Eleanor is working for Kingpin, and it was like, okay, well, why is that bad? It's obviously bad for Kate, but I always felt that the series was leading up to something of like, why did they kill Armand? Why did this happen? But it kind of just ended on like, she killed Armand. And you're like, oh, okay, why? Why did he have to die? I thought it was leading, like he was a part of the clue or step to something else kind of element. It's kind of like in Loki, they just chopped off the heads of those, what they believe is, what did they call them again? The
timekeepers.
The timekeepers. Yeah, like if they chopped off the heads of the timekeepers and were just like, oh, they're fakes, and then we just never found out who was controlling them, even though we know that it's Kingpin, etc. It's like, well, why was he doing all of this? It just didn't seem like... So it meant then that the finale was very like loose in terms of like what exactly they were protecting. They were just like, attack these people because they're getting in our way. I was like, it didn't really have like a central goal that all the characters were doing, because there were so many small little plot lines going on, which again I think can work. I think it was enjoyable for the Yelena element, that you're like, oh, there's this added element now that this woman is trying to kill Hawkeye while he's trying to do this other mission. But I think it just didn't help the fact that there was no sort of central conflict or big plot element that they were trying to stop. At least again, Falcon and Winter Soldier, the idea was to stop that force of characters, etc. Whereas here it was just a kind of like, we need to end this. It wasn't like a central mission, I didn't find. So that's just where it sort of fell apart a bit at the end. But apart from that, I think story-wise, I did like how it sort of tied into Hawkeye's past. I did feel that it was a great way of bringing in Kate, of having this element of she's just sort of thrown into it, but it kind of made sense how she was able to do the things that she did because of her mother's company and like the past of her family. It never felt like they were kind of just shoehorned in or it was all conveniently placed. I think that they did establish that quite well, having a security company, having a father that owed money to Kingpin, being a wealthy family as well, living in the center of New York. I could believe and buy that all of this kind of happened. It never felt rushed. So I think that was the biggest strength for me, is just that kind of involvement of Kate and how she sort of like played her part in it. I think it's just the actual mystery itself is very loose. But as I said at the top, for me, the strengths of this series is in the characters. And I think that the fact that you have such a powerful performance from a character like Echo, from Kate, from Hawkeye, I think that all of that sort of just papered over a lot of the cracks that were in the story. And I think that because the show is having such fun with itself as well, I think like Craig said, the LARPers are a perfect example of like something I would see in the trailers and go like, oh no, often when films or TV shows do like nerd geek culture or things like LARPers, you're sort of like in for a potential bad time of like cheapy looking sets or corny characters. And every time I saw them, I was like, you're doing this well. Like, this is so good, and I was so happy. And that was an element, that's an example of how they really did tie together the story elements really well. The fact that they came in at the end and we're like, we need our backup. And they show up and you're just there with a grin on your face. Like, of course it's them. And the fact that they were playing their parts of the party and they were all suited up, that was, to me, like the real strengths of the connecting the different elements of the story. So on the hero side, they did all of that really well. They tied it all together brilliantly. It's just on the villains side of things that they never quite connected those dots as well.
I remember watching the finale, and the moment they were like, we know what to do, I just said to myself, please dress up. This is what I need right now. Please go and dress up. And they did, and I cheered.
See, I love that the fact they dressed up. I don't know. I think I wanted maybe a little bit more. I wanted maybe their weapons to come out. Also, I don't know. For me, that felt a bit flat, that last joke with the...
I mean, always wanting more is never the biggest issue,
Yeah,
I don't think.
I suppose.
For me, it just solidifies if Marvel want to do something else with them in the future, do it.
They could
just
do it.
do something.
They could do it. Yeah, I think I would agree with both you guys. I'll get the negatives first then. So with the villain side of things, I think the best thing to avoid this problem is, be brave and have Kingpin as your main antagonist throughout the whole series. And I think it's funny because me and Dave have been speaking about this with certain other projects and having cameo reveals, and it's all about, who's going to pop up? Who's the big reveal? That at this point, I think you should be a bit ballsy and go, this is the villain. Here he is in episode 2. We're going with this now from then on. And I think that would have been the best thing to do because they released the 2 episodes on the same day. Have like the end of episode 2. Here he is, and then you can have him throughout the series, and then we know what Clint means when he's talking about the big guys. You know what I mean? And the fear that this guy can bring and why Clint's scared of him, and then you can have scenes with him doing crazy stuff. Granted, not as crazy as the Netflix stuff, because of its rating, but you can have some pretty heavy hardcore stuff in there to go, oh guy, this is the bad guy. So I feel as if that's where they missed it. They're like, I feel as if they so focused on, let's do this crazy reveal at the end, he's back in the MCU, that you maybe realized a better way of utilizing him throughout the show, I think. And then it makes more sense connecting it with Maya. The Tracksuit Mafia are then more like cannon fodder rather than antagonists, you know what I mean? So you don't care as much about them. But all the hero stuff more than makes up for it, I think, for me. And I think because all the silly stuff like the LARPers and the pizza dog and all of that sort of stuff, and the Christmas oil as well, all of the silly stuff, because they do it so well, I do sort of forgive the cracks in the story angles there, because Yelena's story arc is one that I was like, I like it, but I don't know if it's necessary for this show. And this ties in back to the post-credit scene of Black Widow, with Madam Hydra saying, "Oh," it brings out the iPad. Is like, "Oh, do you want to know who killed your sister? It's this guy." And I was like, "Well, how does that correlate with the Hawkeye show? Because she was hired by Kingpin or by Eleanor Bishop." It's a whole thing that you have to think about. And I just think, why are you connecting Yelena's story to the main story in this show when she could just be another element for Clint to deal with? And it's sort of like, oh, for fuck's sake, another thing I have to take care of. Do you know what I mean? I just think is that the handling of all the different story elements was a bit messy. And I also think the biggest thing for me, which I can clearly see, is the fact that they went for three, I should say, different directors for this show. As you've seen in previous Marvel shows, you've had the one director going throughout. Maybe this is also why for you, Dave, you think it's more TV-like.
I was exactly thinking this, that this for me is a plus.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm not saying it's a plus or a negative. It's just a different tone and different style that went for the show. But you can clearly see the different directorial styles in the episodes that were directed by Rhys Thomas and Burton Bertie. And for me, the middle of the show, the episodes 3, 4, and 5, were the stronger episodes directed by Burton Bertie. I thought they brought up all the acting, all the story arcs were making a lot more sense in that. It's just the beginning where you're wondering where you are in the story, and then at the end where it just doesn't quite come together for me. But all the hero stuff, all the goofy stuff, in a way, I'm just having so much fun with it, and it's because it's low stakes, because it's not like No Way Home and Endgame, and I'm just like, why are you doing this sort of thing? I'm just a bit like, yeah, it's low stakes, so I'm not too fussed. And with the Kingpin as well, I do think there is an element of you, the audience, having to already watched the Daredevil Netflix show to get an idea who this guy is. Because also his reveal is a bit like, okay, he's on a telephone text message. I was a bit like, that's not like, this is the Kingpin. You got to have a bit more of a cinematic reveal, I think. I know it's a TV show, but that's just me.
You also just seem to have really shitty digs. Because every time I think of Kingpin, I just think of Spider-Man, the animated series, where he's literally atop a skyscraper. And just there, where it's just like someone's back office. Granted, it was big. It's just...
In Daredevil, he was, living the high life in Daredevil.
Yeah.
All these swanky apartments and stuff. But my own, headcanon sort of thing is that he was blipped. Because season 3 of Daredevil, the last time we see him, was in 2018, the same year as Infinity War. So, in my headcanon, I can go, okay, he was blipped, because recently Vincent D'Onofrio was talking about the show and was like, yeah, it's the same character from the Daredevil show. He's just, he's lost some things in the 5 years that he's trying to regain his power. So I'm like, maybe he was blipped, or, something went wrong. Because if he...
It would be nice if they actually explained that, though.
Well, this is me. You killed... That's why you should have just introduced him at the beginning. Just have the balls and go, here he is, the big guy.
Especially considering this is the series, and again, this is probably my favorite episode of the series was the Ronin episode, where it was Yelena was heavily involved in it, and that, as before I've discussed, I love when they explore the different effects of the blip. In WandaVision, I loved it when we saw how it affected Monica Rambeau. And here they had such an interesting one with Yelena, the fact that she just goes into a bathroom, washes her face, and we get to see somebody who was blipped, their point of view of then how does it feel to actually be blipped? And she walks into a completely different house and stuff like that. That was great. So it goes to show again that can really sort of help your antagonists, protagonists, however you want to view it.
Gonna be late thanks to you.
You're gonna be alive because of me.
Oh. Being a gentleman, walking on the outside, that's nice.
No, it's just so I can hear you. And to be clear, not because I want to, just because I need to.
Oh. What happened?
Too hard to tell. I don't.
Mommy, a superhero. Wow, Stevie, you want to say hi?
Come on, kid. You any tourists?
Hey, look, that one's you.
No, it's Katniss Everdeen. Let's go.
Your problem is branding.
No, my problem is you. In this ninja suit, and the people trying to kill you because of this ninja suit.
Right, so let's get into the characters then, because I think we've all said that it's pretty much been the performances and these sort of character studies that carried the show. Craig, what were your sort of standouts of the whole show?
So I've mentioned them a few times. I just need to just go into detail about the LARPers now.
It's your time to shine, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, I love those guys. I just think in terms of such a beautifully personable but emotive bunch, I think they handled them. I think they handled them well. I was a bit unsure about how I was going to feel about them at first when like the registration scene of "we know who you are, we're just going to take this really seriously" could come off as just, oh, is this just the nerd fandom of just not giving a damn about any real world consequences? It's just to make them seem really uptight. But no, they just get into it really fast, and just some of the most beautiful moments, such as, "Dude, please let me beat you. I need this." It's still one of my favorite moments of this show. Just a swordsman like, "Please let me beat Hawkeye. I need to beat an Avenger." But then just the way in which they sort of ingratiate themselves throughout the rest of the show, I just loved all the small moments of just essentially becoming Hawkeye's little band of helpers. Just the way they talked about everything, and also just the way they just showed like a passion for what they were doing, which didn't necessarily dive into sort of the nerdy complexity of LARPing. Because I've seen shows that, just try and focus on the sort of like, fireball sticker thing throw and just all that technicality. They never go into those levels. They just talk very genuinely and about the things that they like, and just the fact that it is about the costumes and enjoyment. So they're just a lot of fun, and they never sort of fall within the realm of pathetic. So just a really nice, inspiring group of characters. Outside of those guys, then, I've already talked about how much I really enjoyed Maya as a villain and just a relatively sympathetic character. I guess then the other big star of the show then for me, thankfully, is just Clint. I think that it's really nice to basically see sort of the perspective of his life insofar as just how much crap he's just been put through, and just seeing him try to enjoy family time, but just seeing in a variety of different ways the ways in which just everything he's gone through was affected. Especially considering that they've given him this death aspect of just. Granted, I'm not sure how I feel about it from he became deaf from how many windows he crashed through. But just in terms
to
of
be fair, that did cut to an explosion as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of explosions in those windows.
Yeah, and thankfully, I think the last explosion being the attack on the Avengers compound. So, I will give them that. But just the fact that they've given him real consequences for all of those things, and just seeing just how he lives. I think one of my favorite scenes of the show is the phone call he has with his son, and yeah, Jake there showing how much it hits in the feels. But just having Kate there, just having to transcribe everything that's being said so he can communicate with his son, and fair play to this show, they do have a lot of genuine discussions about about being deaf and how it can affect you. Obviously, it can never be or like on the realms of just people's real lived experiences, because they're talking about it in such a heightened reality. But even then, I think it is. I think they do it quite well as a whole, and I think they do it in a way that I think people would be relatively happy with. Yeah, I just really, his character as well. Just like I said, I just saw him as a stand-in for just I'm a bit miserable because a lot has gone on, just having to deal with these things. So just the way he interacts with people, I just thought was basically perfect. The fact that in more serious situations he was trying to keep up that sort of wit and charm, like when he's tied up by the tracksuit mafia, and I can't remember the quip that he gives, but he gives a quip before Kate comes crashing through the window, already completing her training for becoming the new Hawkeye. But yeah, no, Like, his character was just a standout insofar as those interactions. I also just loved his interactions of just him warming up to the idea of considering Kate the world's greatest archer, presumably behind him. But yeah, those are generally, I'd say, my favorite characters in the show as a whole. Like, those are the ones that really stand out for me.
So the lead and the LARPers, essentially.
Yeah.
On the LARPers, I thought they were really well handled, because as soon as like that they were approaching that scene and he's doing the registration, I was thinking this could go either one or two ways. This could come off really, really goofy, and they're gonna be just the annoying characters throughout the series where you're like, go away, go away. But no, really endearing. Especially the fight when he's like, oh, please let me beat you, let me beat an Avenger. But for me, it's when it's all the slow-mo and he's walking down and he's and he's beating all of them one by one, doing all these crazy moves. I love it. I absolutely love it. And then it's after it's Grills, the character he beats, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who's I think he's a fireman, isn't he? Yeah, they're all like policemen and firemen, stuff like that. I love the little moment where he's like, oh, you let me beat you. And he's like, but you had fun though, right? And he's like, yeah, I had fun. And I'm just like, through all the cynical nature, throughout his miserable life, he's like, I just had a little moment of fun there, of just to not worry about anything. And yeah, the scene on the phone with his son, it just pulls your heartstrings. And for me, it's a great moment as well, because it's an important moment for Kate in that, because I think up until that point, she has just seen Clint as like a hero, and like the hero worship and all the, getting excited and all this sort of, and fangirling around him. And it's in this moment where she sees him as a guy who's got a kid, and he's just trying to get by. He's deaf. They've just been through a lot of shit together, and he's putting ice on himself. This is an Avenger who's putting frozen pizzas and I just think that's such a powerful moment for him and for Kate as well, to go to see that.
Also, just his first moment of actual vulnerability in front of her, right? Because he's so in control of this entire situation. That's the first moment where she just sees him in a difficult situation and instantly realizes that she has to act. It's just a very humanizing moment. And I think that was pretty much Hawkeye's big humanizing moment, because every other hero has had them up until this point, and that was just Hawkeye's moment.
Yeah, speaking of her, I want to give a huge shout out to Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop. But I'm going to throw that to Dave, because I know Dave has always been a big fan of Haley Steinfeld. What do you think of her as Kate Bishop?
Yeah, it did feel like, she does deserve the credit, because I think, like Craig said, obviously this is the Hawkeye show, which is, Jeremy Renner in many ways is, one of the big stars. But I think going into it, you kind of are like, okay, how much Renner Steinfeld is this going to be? Is this going to be more the Kate Bishop show or the Hawkeye show? And I think what really does round it off in a great way is at the end, in which he's like, oh, who should I be? Like, what's she saying? Like Hawk Chick and stuff like, and things like that. And
Lady Hawk.
Yeah, exactly. It's great names there. And the fact that he's just like, maybe just Hawkeye. And it's just like, I'm like, oh, that's just perfect. Just the way to do it. Because again, as we've just discussed, we've seen Hawkeye just kind of be exhausted and kind of like retired as we've known in the past from the films. So he is at that stage already. So this is the perfect time to transition that. But I think the show did really well by going, right, let's not make it like, I can't think of an exact example now, but those films or TV shows in which they've clearly got in a legacy actor, but they don't have the legacy actor for enough of the shoot to give them a significant role. They're there for like 2-3 scenes or something. Here, it was really well balanced. And the fact that Hawkeye had his own scenes and he went off on his own still meant it felt like his own show. But, that's the great thing about it, is that they're both Hawkeye, because this is also Kate's show, but she doesn't steal the spotlight, but she does show herself as a really competent character. And, I think whereas, again, someone like Monica, even though she made her stamp, I think there's still loads of room for her to grow in, like, the Marvels. Whereas something like this, I'm like, right, I already completely get Kate. I think that she's, the groundwork is perfectly set up there for her. I'd be happy just to see her carry on the way she is, because if there's any like Avenger or MCU sort of character, apart from maybe the LARPers, that I'd want to hang out with, it's Kate, because she's so enthusiastic, so happy. Just that scene in the lift with like Yelena, or the scene in the apartment, but just like her charisma and her like enthusiasm is very endearing, I think, and sort of helps the show in terms of having that sort of light-hearted nature, which then helps you to get on board more with the LARPers. And I think it goes to show how important casting is. Haley Steinfeld is perfect casting for Kate Bishop, but just with the LARPers, you guys were saying like, oh, this could go one or two ways, and if those were cast with actors who maybe saw them as more stupid, silly characters, it could have gone the other way. But also like her relationship with them, the fact that she's like, oh yeah, you can make costumes, oh that's going to be so cool, and she's talking about Hawkeye's brand. It's just a very infectious charisma. But again, I think it really helped that you saw her from the beginning as a child, because there's still that childlike innocence to her. I think the fact that, again, I really loved that moment in which she says, I saw you jump from that building and you didn't have any superpowers. The fact that you were just fighting aliens with a stick and string. She said that was enough. You showed that being a hero isn't just for people who can fly or shoot lasers out of their hands. It's for anyone who's brave enough to do what's right, no matter the cost. And I just thought that was like a perfect way of not only encapsulating Hawkeye as a character, but this show and her as a character. And that's why I loved also, one of my favorite episodes was the Ronin one, because that conversation with Yelena is fascinating, because she's like, oh, you trust this man who has like, killed all these people? And she's like, well, I acknowledge he's made some mistakes, and who hasn't made mistakes, which I think is a very timely and relevant thing to talk about. But the fact that she isn't holding him up in this like golden throne, she is saying like, no, I understand he's made mistakes, but she also throws it back to Yelena and being like, I would also question who you're working for, because you're also essentially a hired killer as well. So I think that was such a great dynamic, and it showed the strengths of both actresses, that they're both able to come to this as two strong, powerful women who have got very different ideals and very different ways in which they're great characters, but neither one sort of steals the spotlight for the other, because they're so great and so different. So yeah, it was just a joy to watch her throughout this entire series, to be honest, to see that kind of enthusiasm. The moments of being like, oh, can I have this arrow? Like, oh, I can't touch that one, and all this kind of stuff.
Trick arrows.
It was just endearing. Yeah. So, and she really did, earn it by the end. And like Hawkeye says, you fought Kingpin, like I think that she did, that fight was, was pretty cool, that she held her own against, such a powerful character. So, if, as he sort of alludes to there, if there's anything worthy of being an Avenger, right there, it's that. And obviously, again, it's just, she's perfect for this generation as well, because she's there with a cute dog at the end. It's very endearing, where you're like, oh, are they going to get out the car? And as soon as she did, I was kind of like, yay, you see that, she's going to have like a nice family Christmas. And that's what I love about the show as well, is that it has that positivity, that the family, there was no kind of like, oh, my dad, who's this? Like there wasn't no jealousy. The fact that the Bartons were so like immediately like, yeah, come on in, like, oh, more the merrier kind of thing. And that's like the LARPers, the fact that like when Hawkeye's like, can I crash on your couch to grills? He's like, yeah, of course, man, of course. And the fact that everyone is so like kind and genuine in this show, I think just adds to that charm and charisma of all the characters. So again, and I think Kate is really central to that. So that's why I really enjoyed it. I think that the action really works with her, the comedy really works with her, but also the drama and the performance, which came out in scenes with like her mother. I thought that Eleanor, I think like, what's the actress who plays her?
Vera Farmiga.
Yeah, I thought she did a fantastic job as well, even though maybe the script didn't sort of give her loads to work with, or maybe as dramatic a storyline as she could have had. That scene where she like has that one-to-one with Kate in the penultimate episode, in that Ronin episode, where she sort of is talking about protecting her and like, this is what you need to do, and they're looking at the little bow and arrow on the wall. It really sold their relationship. And I think there's a lot of times in these kind of projects, you're like, they're not mum and, like father and son, they're not, but you really were sold the idea that like, oh yeah, I believe that this is a mother and daughter.
Yeah, I bought all that relationship, and I also really loved her relationship with Jack Duquesne as well, Tony Dalton's character, because the back and forth that they kept on having was really great. I especially loved when they had the sword fight as well. And he was like, "Hey, he's not letting on, like, he knows more than." I felt what they did with him towards the end felt a little bit flat, but their banter and relationship was great throughout. And I think for me, the best thing about this show is that it's essentially going, here's your new Avengers. You know, you've got like Echo coming in, not an Avenger, but like here's a new wave of characters joining the MCU. You've got Echo, Kate Bishop, and Yelena. And for me, they were all the stars of this whole show. Like Kate, you beautifully talked about Haley Steinfeld. I completely agree with you. For me, she actually did steal the show against Clint Barton. Not saying that Jeremy Renner was bad. Like I said, this is his best performance as a character. But for me,
she
Haley
is the new addition, isn't she? So
that's what I mean. That's why she stood out to me, and she was a breath of fresh air into this franchise. Haven't really had a character like this since Tony Stark. You know, the brash, arrogant sort of character, but very different to Tony Stark in a lot of ways. But for me, following from Black Widow, it's Florence Pugh's portrayal of Yelena Belova, because for me, there's so much tragedy behind this character, and even in the comedic moments when she's making jokes, you feel that's a sense of falseness, like she's putting this on to get her through this mission. She is so single-minded and driven to killing this person because Natasha was everything to her. She was her only family sort of thing. And I feel that this sense of loneliness from her, this tragic character. And you see that with the blip, you know, where we see it and trying to, like Natasha, you know, wipe the blood off her ledger by helping all these other Black Widows. And leading into the show, like, she's just so tragic. And honestly, I think the scene between her and Kate in Kate's apartment where she comes in might be one of my favorite scenes in the MCU, like acting wise, because the back and forth between them is incredible. You should show this in film school, like if you're wanting to become an actor, because it is literally, as you know, it's the old saying, you know, acting is reacting, and you just see a lot of the times, like if Yelena's saying something, a lot of the time the camera's pointing at Kate, and you just see her facial expressions, and vice versa as well. The macaroni and cheese joke is great, and all of that sort of stuff. So all the comedy really, really works.
And the laugh as well, when she's like, "Oh, that's funny. You think you could kill me?
Kill me? I would have killed you as soon as you walked through the door." Like, yeah. Florence Pugh is just a treasure, a national treasure, I can say, because she is British.
And I'm glad they haven't toned down the accent as well. Again, we've known in the past that they've kind of toned down that kind of stuff.
I think Florence is committing to that accent. For me, sometimes it works. Well, most of the times it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But overall, I'm fine with it. And just, she's going to win so many Oscars in her career. Maybe not as Yelena, but in other roles. But she's just fantastic, and I can't wait to see more of her. And as soon as just that scene finished between them two talking, I looked to my girlfriend who I was watching the show with, and I said, I just want a show of them two now. Please just give me a show of them two. And in the last episode, the lift, and with her pressing all the buttons, it's just so good. And then she like slaps her in the face. She's like, "Oh, how dare you?" sort of thing. It's so good. But at the same time, I think Yelena really, really likes Kate. Like, she's like, let's go have a drink. I need to kill this guy first, but yeah, let's go have a drink after I've done that.
Maybe get some appetizers.
Yeah, maybe get some appetizers. And I think Kate could be that person that Yelena needs in her life to, you know, to have that companion like she had with Natasha. And I think this could be the start of a beautiful friendship.
Same. I just hope we don't get a situation 15 years down the line where those two, now basically being the new Black Widow and Hawkeye of the MCU, have a heartbreaking decision where one of them has to be sacrificed.
Oh, God.
No.
That would be tragic.
If they had a situation like that, I think it'd be worse than Natasha Clint, because we saw their bonding from day one, as opposed to those two where it's very much implied.
I was thinking as well, like if you did get a future Avengers and like, because again, Kate could go to like West Coast Avengers or Young Avengers, but if she was in the actual team in the future and Yelena was there as well as the new Black Widow, it'd be really interesting if you had all these other characters and they were like talking to each other and they're like, how have you already got this chemistry? And they're like, oh, we tried to kill each other once. And they're like, oh, right, okay.
It is a sort of parallel origin because Clint also says, I think he's telling, when he tells to Kate, like, the most important shot I took was the one I didn't take.
Oh, yeah, true.
And Kate feels as if she had the opportunity to fire it at Yelena. Yelena would say, you wouldn't have killed me, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But she had that moment and she said, could this be the moment that I don't take the shot? That's the most important part. And I think it is. I think it is.
I did also laugh hysterically at not just the lift scene, but the reaction of Yelena to the lift scene. Because one moment she does that, she was like, oh, come on. Just like, so, yes. Can't be a good old come on.
I think for a character as well, though, even though it is kind of like shoehorned in at the end, the kind of like, why did you kill Natasha with Hawkeye and everything like that? I didn't think that they like completely missed the point of it. I think because they did build up with Hawkeye enough that there was that trauma of Nat's death, because I've seen a lot of people say that like, oh, this series has handled the mourning and the loss of Natasha better than Endgame or the Black Widow film has, because he kept flashing back to that moment or he saw her name on the sign. So I felt that they did build up to that really well from his point of view. It was kind of random why like Yelena's sort of story came into it, but I still felt that they at least laid the groundwork for that regret, at least from Clint's point of view, very well. That kind of had to be brought up. And again, it's a kind of like element of like, well, yeah, Clint and Yelena would eventually have to speak to each other. It does seem weird that they haven't communicated at this stage.
Mm-hmm. But he did know her though, because obviously he says she always spoke about her. But when was that, Hawkeye? Huh? I've watched every single MCU film. Not once did she mention.
We'll take your word for it.
Well, yeah, we'll take your word for it. So another person I'd like to give a shout out to is Alakwa Cox, who plays Maya Lopez, who will soon be known as Echo. I thought she was fantastic, and doing some research on the actress, it's the first thing she's ever done.
I know, crazy.
It is absolutely insane, and clearly, I mean, well, we saw what Marvel saw in this show. She's fantastic, but in the auditioning process, they must have seen something, and then in production doing this, they must have gone, she deserves her own show, because she's just carrying so much weight and emotion behind her in everything she does. And I have to say, this has been a fantastic year for the deaf community in film and TV. In Marvel, we've got now Echo. We had Makari in Eternals. We had Sound of Metal earlier on this year, and there was something else. There was another nerd thing that had somebody using sign language. I can't remember now. But I think they've handled it beautifully here. So more of that, please. And and also she's an amputee. She's got a prosthetic leg, and she still kicks so much ass. Like it's incredible. I can't wait to see her in her own show. I think we mentioned up top about, is the Kingpin dead or not? I don't think he's dead. I think for me anyway, it makes sense that he would be a big player in the Echo show. So we'll see what happens. But do you guys want to put anything about Maya Lopez?
I do appreciate with Kingpin and her the kind of comic references as well. I've seen a few things online about like his costume in the finale was like a reference to that Spider-Man comic. There's like a front cover where he's got like his cane over Spider-Man. He's wearing that like Hawaiian shirt.
Family business.
Yeah. There's also then there's the frame from, I think then, where the same thing happens, where Maya's like holding a gun to him and he says like the same thing. He's like, you don't want to do this, Maya, you don't want to hurt family or something like that. So it's, this is, probably one of the more faithful adaptations in that they pulled so much, especially from the Matt Fraction Hawkeye comics, because, that bridge scene and like driving over and running away from Tracksuit Mafia, like directly out of the comics. But also like additions like that, is really nice. They're not too on the nose. It's just stuff the comic book fans can watch and go like, oh yeah, I appreciate that. But it's not there just going like, this is what it is. So, but yeah, I think it's good as well, the fact that they're two very different characters with Makari and Maya, in that like here it's she's using that aspect of her to her advantage and using it as a power, whereas like Makari, it's more like, you know, she's a speedster and she happens to be deaf, which is a great way of making it just a normal, natural thing. But here it's she's using that as her power, especially when she's using sign language and the way she reacts to Clint. Like she's like, oh, this changes things, like, you know, do you know sign and everything? And he doesn't fully know it, which is quite a nice way of actually balancing what some people could say is a criticism of being like, oh, Jeremy Renner isn't actually deaf, you know, should you have this guy play it? But the fact that the character himself is almost like, look, I'm kind of new to this, I don't know the language fully already, it almost is kind of like he is Jeremy Renner in that sense, that, you know, he's kind of like new to this element of the character and to this world. So when you've got somebody like her, which then balances it out by fully being into this world and understanding it, I think that makes it work all the better. And also, she has probably one of the best character reveals of any of the episode. Like that end credit scene, like the credits after it with like the bass, I was just like, yes, like I'm fully feeling
the
this
red
stuff.
lighting as well.
Yeah,
which I thought was a reference to Daredevil, because obviously she is a big villain of Daredevil.
Yeah, going back to what David said about the about like the deaf conversations that Maya and Clint end up having. I really like those just because it's mimicking a lot of what actually does happen in a lot of deaf communities. There is a big debate about whether or not, you know, hearing aids actually help the community or not, whether or not it takes them away from the aspects such as like sign. David and I would have seen this discussion play out in something else earlier in the year, but it is not nerdy, so we're not going to bring it up. Or it might be sufficiently too nerdy that we get kicked off the show. I don't know. But it was actually quite a nice, nice, real sort of discussion for them to necessarily have. And I think, again, that's why I think it's perfectly fine for Jeremy Renner to be doing it, because it does show where like acting does need to be people assimilating into a role in order to be able to portray certain stories. There are just things that, like, progression stories necessarily need to be handled by people who to some extent are able to show the sort of transitioning, if you know what I mean, right? The fact that he's also embracing that language, you know, once he's fought her and trying to win around as well, I thought was a nice touch. The fact he is basically taking more effort to engage with her on her level, and also works as a good parallel for also how he like talks Yelena around eventually, just finding out what it is that she physically needs to hear, no pun intended, but just addressing her like that, even if we sort of all agree that storyline sort of had a bit of a rushed conclusion, being a bit too convenient at times. I think that the actual premise of what they're trying to get to was quite nice.
Also, Jake, I think the project you were thinking of, which is surprising we forgot about it, is A Quiet Place 2 in terms of another.
That's the one. A Quiet Place 2. Yes.
I was jokingly going to say Strictly Come Dancing, given...
Well, it is another thing, though, that has added to this conversation.
That is also something that, it is.
Yeah. And the project that I was referencing, Coronation Street.
Something very different to the nerd culture. Well, it's got its own fandom, I guess.
Yeah, me and David.
Apparently so. Right, so before we get into the next section, any other characters we want to shout out?
I'm surprised we've not mentioned Lucky the dog yet.
Ah, Pizza Dog.
I feel like we should.
The only thing I thought at the start of it was like, why did he like take the, you know, at the beginning I was like, oh, does this dog actually know what he's doing? You know, when he like steals the item at the beginning and she goes chasing after him. But I was like, no, apparently he just randomly wanted to interfere.
A dog does what a dog does.
Yeah, but he's very cute. You know, everyone sort of. And I always liked that they brought it into the story by having Clint being like, we need to walk the dog, we need to get back for the dog and stuff like that. It's just realistic.
I love the scene in the subway where Kate's like, we need to walk the dog. And Clint, because he obviously hasn't got his hearing aid in, we need to walk the dog.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, we should also get some food. Oh, we should also get some food as well.
Actually see him all that much. you see him every now and then sort of munching on pizza, but the way that I've always heard about this dog, because I know nothing of the actual comic, the comics stories of Hawkeye, but I've always heard that Lucky was like a relatively big part, so I just assumed that the dog would be a bit more proactive and not just, oh, he's really cute and every now and then it's just, he's in the house on his own, we got to let him out for a shit.
Well, I think because unless you want to do a CGI dog, a real dog can't do a lot of the stuff that he's doing in the comics.
Especially because they're already CG in his eye, because obviously I think it'd be quite difficult to find an actual golden.
And we've seen the backlash of the Lion King and what happens when you CGI real animals. So.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, clip note version there. What sort of things do they do in the comic?
Just jumps out of windows and
I see,
all
right.
sorts, all sorts of crazy comic book stuff. So, yeah. Like we mentioned, we weren't too much of a fan of what they did with the character of Jack Duquesne, but I gotta give Tony Dalton credit for his performance because he's giving it 110%. He's loving it. I love how he just plays this. Nothing phases the guy. He's like, oh, don't worry, this will all get sorted before Christmas. And he's just so great. And that moment at the end where he go, it's my time to shine with that sword. It's so good.
I also love to go back to the LARPers stuff as well, is what Craig was saying about how they were natural in the way that they approached them. I just love the way, this is a fantastic character as well, is that policewoman who's like, this is my bag. And she's like, and you were really invested in that bag. I was like, I hope this bag is okay. And when he walks in the next episode, I was like, I think that's the bag. I hope it's the bag.
And apparently she's cool with tampering with police evidence.
Yeah. But what I did love with her was at the end, when he was just like, like she was talking to him and she was like, well, I'm a part of a guild. And I was like, yes, this is the thing. Like, she's recruiting him. This is perfect. This is just the right level of nerd that she's like, it's like a dungeon master. Usually, you should join us sometime. I was just like, this is the right level to do. Not like Craig was saying, the typical kind of like casting spells and stuff, which I loved. I do have to ask you guys, though, do you think he was actually killing people at the end? Because most of the arrows were like, right, we're going to shoot them in the foot. They've been knocked out, this kind of spray, electrocuted, paralyzed, stunned. He was just slicing people up. I'm like, are they dead?
They are dead.
I think he gave up. He gave up by that point. He's like, they're just going to die.
They tried to frame him for murder, let's be fair. I think he was more than happy to see them go.
So some people online were like, how is the Kingpin getting shot with arrows and nothing's happening? So I'm like, because it's the Kingpin, man.
Yeah, I did love how he just snapped it out of it. He was just like, whatever. That was great.
It's like, and if you've seen the Daredevil show, which you probably have if you're watching Hawkeye, you know that he's got these armored suits and all of that sort of stuff. But whatever. It's the Kingpin. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't do that.
I don't know if this would count as well as character, but I saw this and I had to bring this up because it was very random when I saw it, and now I do kind of love it and understand why this happened more. And it goes in with the lucky animal stuff. But what did you guys think of the random owl that just appeared in the last episode?
Oh, that fucking owl! I cried.
So do you want to know?
When they, because obviously, yeah, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's cute. I don't know what they're building for, and just the fact that then the owl brutally takes away those two guys who have been shrunk with pin particles.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit.
It was just when he jumped in, he was like, oh, hello. And it's like that, obviously an owl always looks kind of like shocked or surprised. I was like, oh, are they leading some goofy joke of him like attacking, like he thinks he's attacking his nest, or he's like going to poo on him or something stupid like that. So I'm glad that didn't happen. But I saw this on the trivia for the show. I was like, that is amazing. So that owl, when they shot this scene, the tree was brought to the Rockefeller Center because it was obviously filmed not at Christmas. It was brought in April. And when they brought the tree over, a tiny adult male sword owl named Rocky traveled 170 miles with the tree from Norway to upstate New York.
Really?
Rocky was rescued from this tree and sent to Ravensfield Wildlife Center. I was just like, oh my God, there's an entire backstory. Why? The fact they were like, this owl now needs to appear in the show. I just fucking love that.
Oh, I hope they form like a little Pets Avengers with Lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know a lot of people have said, "Oh, Lucky and the cat from
Captain Marvel,
Captain Marvel, etc." But yeah, that owl now he's been on a journey.
Owl,
He deserves.
Rocky.
Yeah.
Hi. I made macaroni if you want some.
I am not gonna just sit and have dinner with you after you tried to kill me and then just broke into my house.
I did not try to kill you. A, I put you on a wire to remove an obstacle. And B, I did not break anything. I am way too talented than that. And C, stop being so defensive. Okay? You're so hostile. I'm not going to hurt you. I promise. I don't have any weapons on me. Okay, I take that back. I don't have any weapons currently in my hands. That's a lie also. In all honesty, if I wanted to kill you,
You would have already.
Right as you open the door.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have even had time to shut it.
No.
I'd have been dead.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Is there anything else about this series that we haven't talked about that you want to bring up? This can be more the technical side of things, any of the action sequences, visual effects, music, lighting, production design, anything else you want to bring up?
Can we start talking about my new personal pet project, which is I want Rogers the Musical to be a thing?
Yes. Let's talk about the musical then. Craig, as someone who has been on stage before and has performed in front of people in a stage very similar like we saw there, what did you think of Rogers the Musical? First of all, how it was used like in the show, in like I think it was the first episode, and then the full-on number right at the end, the post-credit scene.
The best trolling use of an end credit sequence or a mid credit sequence I have ever seen. Because obviously everyone's been watching these shows thinking, okay, what is going to be the big credit scene that they build up to? And this was just, nope, this is Christmas. We're not going to do anything to advance. Very much like this show itself. We're not going to do anything to massively advance the universe or like disrupt the status quo. We're just going to give you a full-on musical number. So, like, I have several questions. One, I don't understand, given that the entire song sequence itself was covering the Battle of New York, why this is a Steve Rogers musical. Especially considering that I'm unsure from the song's perspective exactly who the hero or the heroine of this show is, because it's very much, you don't usually see extras given that significant a song role in most of these West End musicals. Usually, if they're going to do that, they make it more of an ensemble. But it's very much just that random guy in the suit. It's very much his musical number, at which point is the show from his perspective? And then they just get into it, and obviously the song is just, I Could Do This All Day. Again, it's unclear to me, given that Tony Stark was very much the major hero of the Battle of New York because of the Chitauri incident, why this is a Steve Rogers musical moment. But these are just my sort of jokey gripes. I don't actually care about all of that stuff. I thought the song is amazing. For days after, obviously when you first see it in the first episode, it's just like, oh, okay, this is quite fun. This is meant to be a bit cringy, and the sort of thing that you see Clint going, what the hell is going on? Is this seriously how I'd be portrayed in the show? Once I saw the full-on musical number at the end, I was sort of like humming to myself, like the tune, especially the chorus. It is a very well put together song, and I think in terms of the actual lyrics of what they're trying to build up, insofar as just the Avengers as a unit, I think it does a very good job. Like I said, I think it fails at being a Steve Rogers the musical song, because it's a fucking Avengers song. Why is this here? You are not the fucking head of the Avengers at this point. Like, come on, mate. But I just thought it was a great inclusion for what is very much meant to be sort of the closest thing we'll get in the MCU to sort of a family entertainment show for Christmas. It's the sort of thing I will happily go and revisit at any point. It was just wholeheartedly entertaining, and just, I want more songs now. I also just love the stage effects they also do, even if, like, obviously they'll never do anything good with Hulk, because how do you get somebody massively expanding on stage? which isn't just as Jake sort of suggested, just the sort of big styrofoam hands. I really love the staging of having Loki flying around in the background. That was a really nice touch. Some of the dance moves I did like that they try to incorporate some of the dance moves with like Natasha's sort of very well-known awkward pose. They do incorporate some of that quite nicely. It's just a good song. I do like it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I don't know if I can go into that much detail. I loved how it was used in the episode. I thought it was really funny. And one highlight was when Hawkeye was like, I was there. It's like, you know who wasn't there? That guy. And he's like pointing at the Ant-Man.
That's what I kind of love about it, is that it's almost like a meta thing of like the fact that the comic is like originally like Ant-Man is a founding member. I'm like, are they suggesting that like the story of the Avengers is like a mistold, you know, like story? That there's like, that's why that comic was that way, because
we're going back on ourselves.
Yeah, it's like, you know, they're rewriting history. It's like, oh, that never actually happened. So it's funny that like, yeah, like in Logan, like when they have the actual X-Men comic, it's like if comics were to come out in the MCU universe, would Ant-Man be a part of the Battle of New York? And it would be one of those things of like, oh, by the way, you know that's actually just a lie, that never actually happened, but it's just become like...
You would get some really shitty conspiracy theorists who'd be like, Ant-Man was at the Battle of New York. What, he's really small? Like, you can't tell. You can't tell me he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Thing is, I also saw it as like, because they could have put any superhero in that sort of thing, but they used Ant-Man, and I think, it could be a reference to he was one of the original Avengers, but I also look at it on more like, because to me anyway, I feel as if Clint and Scott have quite a different relationship between themselves, because he was the one to pick him up in Civil War, and like he's got the Pym arrows and all of that sort of stuff. So I think they have like this certain bond between them two. So I like that he's almost like making fun of, he wasn't there, like I was there.
And also that they're both kind of B-level Avengers. The fact that like Ant-Man in these films, unlike Clint, well, you know, Clint hasn't appeared like, say like Black Widow, who's appeared in different, you know, like in Captain America films, and then like Iron Man's popped up in Spider-Man and stuff. You know, Ant-Man hasn't really like crossed in and out as much. Similar to Hawkeye, so it's both as if they're both there representing the kind of like, hello, we're here too kind of characters.
We're here. Yeah. In regards to the full number though at the end, like my thought process as this was happening was like, oh, okay, what's this? And then after a while I was like, where's this going? Because I thought it was gonna be like an actual scene, and then like I was like, oh, they're doing the full number, aren't they? And I was warned about this. Steph, our mutual friend, said, don't watch the end credit scene. You're going to hate it. I've got to watch it. Like, it's Marvel. And yeah, I don't hate it, but musicals aren't my thing, as Dave knows. And yeah, but fair play, Marvel. You trolled us all. And I appreciate the troll.
Yeah, again, I like it for the troll value, the similar, you know, the vibes of... you know, like where we've made fun of Derek Arsehole, but the original, actually, what was his name? I forgot his name now. The original.
I can't remember now. He's always been
original
Derek
what?
Arsehole.
Sorry.
It's an in joke.
No, the actual what Evan Peters was playing. What was his name? In WandaVision, what was the act like his name, where she was just like something Boner, wasn't it?
Ralph Boner.
Ralph Boner, yeah. So it was like the Ralph Boner sort of moment. But yeah, and I think that it's funny to me from that point of view, but it also is quite like the kind of like, when the trailers came out, everyone was like, oh my God, I want this to be a thing. And loads of people on Twitter were very much like, this needs to be a full musical. I want it to actually exist. So it seems kind of similar to No Way Home, of there being like, oh, let's give the fans what they want. But then I think equally there's probably 50% of the fandom which didn't ask for that, which have like then been lumbered with it. But I also think there's 50% of people who loved watching it. I think that it is more enjoyable by having like Clint's reaction to it. But then at the same time watching it, you are like, well, it is meant to be a cringy, silly musical. And like Craig, like I did enjoy like noticing certain elements, like the fact that there's like the Chitauri dancers and they've got like the big hats and stuff like that did make me laugh.
You You know what it also reminded me of? I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was doing the rounds on social media a while back of the clip of that Spider-Man musical and like Green Goblin and all the Sinister Six coming out. It just reminded me of that and go, if I was watching this would be absolute torture.
Years ago, David used to make me mix CDs for my car. And one of them had the villain song from that musical, which was Freaks Like Me Need Company. So for a while, I would just listen to that song a lot in my car.
Pure like bad musical vibes. But also, Craig, this kind of reminded me in a way because they've delved so much into the like adapting nerd franchises into musicals, which are like parodies of Disney and stuff like that. It did remind me of something like Twisted or Holy Musical Batman, in which they're wearing that they're wearing like ordinary clothes. And even this song kind of reminded me, which I guess is a rip-off of Belle, but like The Dream a little harder, because they had those moments of like, like like, and like the building up to the different characters. I was like, this reminds me a lot of something like Twisted. This is kind of funny. But
I'm just glad that they decided to just actually go, you know what? People are going to be expecting us to sort of build up for the next big twist. Let's just not do that, because it would sort of be a betrayal of what this show is trying to do. If it's meant to just be wholehearted light fun, just keep everything light fun.
Yeah. And it's also, and like I said, it actually did say a Christmas gift for Marvel, and I think it did kind of like suit that vibe as well. If here's a fun little Christmas gift, it wasn't a kind of like, because again, there was nothing in the show. I was there literally like, what would it be? I can't, WandaVision, you're like, oh, is it going to be Doctor Strange? Is it going to be this? Other series, you weren't
like, oh, what could it be?
Yeah, like, because there just didn't seem like anything it could be, in all honesty. So I was kind of like, yep, whatever, like that's fun, that's fine. But
especially if they know that many people are only going to watch this show around Christmas time, it'd be a bit evil, sort of locking something so fundamentally important to the universe at the end of something people are only going to visit every 12 months.
I do have to, like Craig said, I have to question the like the story in universe, though. I am like Craig, I'm like, is this like a Steve Rogers? Like, why does the Battle of New York, like, what does that, like, is it like about Steve, or like, is it about like the musical is like him as a soldier and like him becoming Captain America, and like Endgame is like the final act of the musical, or is it an Avengers musical which for some reason is just named after Steve? I don't know.
Really, it should be Coulson the musical, because he's the one who got the Avengers together.
Yeah.
I still want to meet the bell end in that universe who thought, you know what I think this world needs? The Statue of Liberty to have the Captain America shield.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the person I want to meet.
I still don't know what's going on with that.
No, so strange.
I'm sure that will be explained in the future.
And Yelena has confirmed that it isn't ruined. Like Spider-Man maybe left it on a note of like, oh, well, maybe they won't carry on with it because it's being trashed. But like, no, it seems to be fine.
Seems to be fine. Right, so let's get into our closing thoughts. Craig, you said this is something, because of the setting, you can only watch it once a year. Normally, when we close out these reviews, I always ask our guests, would this something you'd rewatch? You're not going to watch it all year round, but is this something you would watch every Christmas?
I definitely think there are definitely enough sort of moments that I would want to revisit the series, because usually with something like this, I would just try and find sort of YouTube sort of clips just of that particular scene. I think because there are so many iconic things for me that I would want to revisit, I definitely probably would watch all of the episodes again. Hell, this might tempt me to creep it out slightly past December. I don't know exactly how much yet, because obviously the thing with Marvel at the moment is they're bombarding with so much anyway, so I very much have to see. But there's definitely potential. I think that the Christmas element is something that I could probably forgive just because of all the other elements, because apart from, as David said, the gotta get home for Christmas, there's nothing about the story itself that is intrinsically Christmas.
That's fair enough. I would probably agree with you. I would lump it in with my like nerdy Christmas stuff, like with the Batman Returns or like the animated Christmas specials and stuff like that. I would lump it in there with my nerdy Christmas rewatch. How about you, Dave? Is this one that you're going to look at every Christmas?
Yeah, I think it would, even if you just had like a Hawkeye day or something, it'd be fun to watch through. Like, I recently rewatched WandaVision, but it kind of worked for that because it was like near Halloween and stuff like that as well. So, but again, I think you could watch WandaVision any time of the year, but, it was something quite like, like watching it at the right time of the year. So I think
Spooky.
Hawkeye does have like a slight element of that, but it is more like heavy that you would like, this is really tied to that holiday. So yeah, I think it is great that, they do have a kind of like Christmas themed show, which is clever on their part, that they have gone like, right, well, these shows are coming out throughout the year. This kind of match the holidays or the events that are going on throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a great show to put on while you're wrapping all your presents just in the background. And just good, clean, wholesome fun, as I said at the beginning. Right, so closing thoughts then. Do you want to see more of Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye? And what are your closing thoughts on this show, Craig?
I mean, obviously, I want to see more of Jeremy Renner. I think we're definitely gearing up to the stages where he's going to be more of a primary mentor role. So I think we're gearing him up to that quite nicely, because I think the motivational talks he's had with various characters are getting stronger. And like, it'll be sad to see him eventually have to, put the bow down, but I think we're getting to that stage. But he's also just a very witty character, so even if he is only going to be there in a generally supportive role, I'm perfectly happy with that. And it's something that I definitely am very supportive of seeing, even if that's what we get next, is sort of season 2, where primarily the action is just Kate Bishop, but just there are various aspects of sort of both hero training and life training that Clint just gives on the side.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Dave. Do you think we'll get a season 2 of Hawkeye, or do you think Kate and Clint are just going to be seen in other projects?
Yeah, I was thinking that as well, because again, I was talking so much about it feeling like a TV show, and whereas something like Loki was like, Loki will return for season 2. We haven't really had that for any other series, so I think the only thing that holds this back from a season 2 is that it isn't literally like setting itself up for a second season. There's no sort of clear storyline they should or have to do next. But I think, like Craig said, I think that you could easily lead into Kate, and it could be Hawkeye still, but it's because she is now the new Hawkeye. He could be there as a mentor. And I honestly wouldn't be gutted to see Jeremy Renner take more of, like, obviously people like Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. are, pretty much gone at this stage. And then you have people like Chris Hemsworth, etc., which are still quite heavily involved. But I don't mind him being sort of like that in between, because we're talking so much about character reveals. How great would it be if Hawkeye did get a moment like Cap walking out of the shadows in Infinity War, that it comes as a surprise because we haven't seen him in a while or something like that. That being said, I can see them picking up the Laura kind of stuff with Mockingbird, but I do feel that this covered off enough of Hawkeye's personality and his like past and who he is as a character that I was quite happy with this series just to leave it off. It wasn't that I was there like, oh, I still need more Hawkeye, I still need more Jeremy Renner. I'm happy with everything we've had in the films. I'm happy with everything we've had in this series. I don't sort of need to focus on him anymore. I would be happier going forward with Kate, because even if they did Hawkeye season 2, I would be happy if it was a kind of mini Young Avengers or West Coast Avengers series, because she seems so enthusiastic and such a lovable character. I could easily see her wanting to recruit more people, or people just being attracted to her charm anyway, and her vibing with kind of younger characters. If you're dealing with people like Ironheart or Wiccan and characters like that, then I could imagine that she would be quite a good sort of like mini mentor or like, character to sort of draw in these younger characters and be like, look, I'm a bit older than you. I'm like university age. I can show you the ropes. I can sort of, take control of the situation, but also equally cause chaos. Because again, she, and I think as long as, say, you still had some of the writing staff from here, or you still have Bert and Bertie, as you mentioned earlier, Jake, because I think all of them were well directed. I think with Rhys Thomas, big up, Pontypridd director there. I think you could tell with him that he wasn't maybe as strong as Bert and Bertie, but I think that it's like we've said before, don't put these directors, like who've done great indie projects straight onto Eternals or whatever. Give them the time to build up. And I think that you could see here that there was glimmers of him having great directorial stills, but didn't know where saw land. So I'd be happy to see more from him, happy to see more from Burton Bertie. And I think that if them and the writers were still involved with Kate in whatever project it is, whether it be a season 2 or Young Avengers series or whatever, you would still have faith that character was being written and portrayed in the same way. So it would be a spiritual season 2, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say onto that is I echo a lot of your thoughts. For me, this show was all about the fresh blood, bringing in all these new characters, which I love, and I just want to see more of them in any way possible. I just want to see a Kate and Yelena show, please. Just them two, like a buddy cop type of show. That would be so much fun. And I do want to see more of Clint, but as you said, as the sort of mentor leader of the West Coast Avengers or something. And I think he was even alluding to that when somebody asked him. He was like, well, we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? So I think we will be seeing a lot more of Clint Barton in the future, along with Kate Bishop, or as Yelena says, Kate Bishop. Just keep saying that full name to intimidate somebody. I'm going to use that tactic for the future. All right, so let's get out of here. We've given our thoughts on Hawkeye, the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We thank you all for listening to the show and jumping on board. However, we have a new person on this show. Craig, you're not usually on here, so they don't know where they can find you. Where can the audience find you on Twitter? And who's going to be plugging Well Good Movies, you or Dave?
I'm guessing it's me, because you can follow me on Twitter if you want, but I literally never use it. I think I've sent a grand total of about 2 tweets in my entire life. So unless you want to see my attempt at home tasking from last year, there's no point following me. David, I'm guessing you were right for me to do the Well Good Movies.
Yeah, well, like I say, Craig has been doing our sort of catch us next time, so it makes sense for Craig to do you can just replicate what he did in our Christmas episode.
I'm not going to do that because I was bickering. Yeah, so basically, I am the co-host of Well Good Movies alongside David. You can basically find us on I'm going to say almost all of the good podcasting sites. I've been told apparently there are some obscure ones we're not on. I'm sorry. But yeah, we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. You can find us there under Well Good Movies. You can also find all of our episodes via our website, where not only do we have Well Good Movies, we have a number of other writing projects. Jake is one of our writers, which is freshtakehub.co.uk or .com? .com. Cool. We are global. Yeah, very much. You can find us. You can find us there, and also you can find us. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram, both for Well Good Movies and also for Fresh Take. Yeah, that's basically where you will find me systematically bullying David a lot of the times.
And Dave, where can the people find you online to get away from Craig's bullying?
I know, yeah. You won't find me bullying anywhere, hopefully. You can catch me on Twitter at David Osger. I do post regularly. Maybe I'll post on behalf of Craig, or maybe you'll just see anecdotes or stories and you can just imagine that maybe Craig is there in some certain situations, especially if it's probably seen something bizarre in public or something. If me and Craig are down in like Swansea or Cardiff or something bizarre is happening at the cinema, then I'm sure Craig would be there, like the many like fun cinema stories we always have. So yeah, catch me on there. You can catch me on Letterboxd as well, where I sort of like review the films I'm watching in the cinema, etc. And also catch me with Craig at Well Good Movies. We've got loads of cool stuff coming up in the new year, and we've got like a bit of a revamp and some new stuff coming with the podcast. So there's lots of exciting stuff to check out with that. And as I mentioned in my Eternals review we did, Jake, I didn't manage to get it out then, but hopefully I am going to get my sort of representation article out, which is going to time nicely with, like we said, all of these things coming out, including Strictly Come Dancing and Coronation Street, which talk about the importance of characters and them being portrayed by actors and actresses with disabilities, etc.
Great stuff, great stuff. Yes, plenty of exciting projects coming down the line. As for us, Capes, Cowls Masks, we're actually going to take a little bit of a break for a few weeks, as we didn't get much of a Christmas break with all this wonderful nerd stuff coming out over the Christmas period, so we decided to get it all covered. But now we're going to take a couple of weeks break while we regroup, and we'll be back with a fresh new show with a new direction. We'll see where that takes us. But in the meantime, if you still want to hear mine and David's voice, and you're a Star Wars fan, this week the Book of Boba Fett has started, which also means the return of the Mondaylorians, the Star Wars podcast that me and David co-host with our friend Niall Glynn. So if you're a Star Wars fan, I want to get the lowdown what's happening over with Desert Old Daddy, Book of Boba, and Fennec Shand. Check us out. We're on all available podcast platforms. So check us out there, and we'll be back later in January, maybe. Yeah, late January, we'll be back with the new show of Capes, Cowls and Masks. So you can find and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Capes, Cowls Masks. And you can also find us on Anchor, Spotify, Google, Apple, all the major sites. Subscribe and follow us on there. And if you're on Apple, leave us a rating and a review. It all helps us go up in the rankings. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you all very soon. Stay safe, everyone, and have a happy, happy New Year. Goodbye, everyone.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye.